Joining me today is WorldNetDaily senior editor, hard word to say, Amanda Bartolotta. She has made it her life's mission to expose this crime against Americans. And I am so proud that she has joined the team at WorldNetDaily to do her work. Amanda Louise, I couldn't be happier to introduce you to our audience and welcome you on the team. And just, I'm so proud and honored that you decided to join WorldNetDaily. Thank you.
Oh, and I appreciate the opportunity to join. It seems that, it's been so hard and a long, hard fight just to find people who really, truly care about this effort and to see how much you care about it, how much sleep you've lost. Nice to know I'm not alone on that. So I appreciate the opportunity to have a voice and a platform and a good ally in this fight. So I appreciate it.
We are allies. And I'll tell you what, everybody who's watching, I've been doing tons of work on this and interviewing, all kinds of players who've been fighting this fight. And stay tuned. Go to WorldNetDaily, subscribe to our email alerts. We're going to put together a list specifically for every update out of WorldNetDaily on this issue, all the related issues. So if you want to be the first to know about it, get on our email list at WorldNetDaily, and that'll be below you. You'll see where to go to, wnd.com/something. I think it's /email, but I'm not sure. Also, follow WorldNetDaily on X. It's just at WorldNetDaily. Follow Amanda Louise, as I call her, and it's at ALB, and I'm at Elizabeth Farah. So today Amanda really thought that it was important we begin her part of this series, and she'll be back over and over and over again. We'll be probably recording at least once a week, and her reports are going to come out at WorldNetDaily, multiple reports weekly. We thought that it was important that we start with this major premise, and I'll have Amanda flesh it out. But the major premise is this, that we do not have in America enough skilled workers, tech workers in the tech industry, and we must import masses of foreigners to take the jobs that Americans can't fill or don't want to, and that these people from India and China are more skilled, more qualified, more experienced, better suited to the job. We need them. And Amanda is going to be blowing that apart today. And so jump in right there. Why don't you talk a little bit about what that idea is, that Americans are not skilled, but Indians and Chinese are?
And that's one of the areas that, we'll get to talk about really soon. When Monday, my article publishes, we're going to talk about the skilled workers and how that kind of plays into today, where we're going to talk about some of the practices that these employers have with perms, where even in the data itself, which is published by the DOL, and it's the employer's data, so what they're submitting to the Department of Labor in order to try to get permanent residency for these H-1B workers. In that process, they're actually publishing for the first time in all of their documents really what that and worker experience, what their skills are like, where they're from. The only time that you really get in on those H-1B workers. And with that, when you look at the skills side of those things, you'll actually start to see that that is completely false. And the people that they're wanting here permanently are actually underskilled or underqualified for even the jobs that they're working in. And the employer wants to sponsor them permanently. So, just starting there with the skills, it's a complete lie.
Let's begin this sort of setting the table or the groundwork for what has been happening in America. If you're in the tech industry, you should be following all of us on X, and you should be going to WorldNetDaily and have on their email address. If you're in the tech industry, or if you know people who are, there is a massive amount of collusion, criminal conspiracy, corruption in the, as I call it the immigration industrial complex. And what PERM is, and I think we should talk about that for a minute, is taking temporary workers from different kinds of visas and offering them permanent status in the United States of America, which inevitably leads to naturalization, or almost inevitably leads there. That's the intention. That's what they call a green card, but it's all capitals, PERM, PERM. And what is happening is the companies want this cheap labor. So for whatever visa they begin with, they want to transform it or replace that with a green card. The issue is that H-1B is not supposed to lead to a permanent or naturalized status, but PERM or green card does. And they want to take it through the process. And so the first thing I would like you to explain is, what is the difference in the requirements for the employer to search for qualified American employees or workers to take these jobs, the difference between H-1B and PERM? Explain that.
So H-1B, the employers, unless they're a willful violator or that they are H-1B dependent, aren't required to try to recruit for an H-1B worker. They essentially, even if they are a willful violator or H-1B dependent, as long as they're paying that H-1B worker more than $60,000 or they have a master's, then they're still not held to a requirement to recruit for an American. Whereas if you go through, correct. Whereas if you go through the permanent program through the DOL and you're going to get ready to file the 9089 to begin that process of permanent residency, you are required to first go through a recruitment method. You also have to file for a prevailing wage determination, which you can do the prevailing wage and the recruitment at the same time, because it does take a little bit of time to approve those prevailing wages. But you have to submit them at the same time while they're both in a sense, because you have a certain amount of window that you have to do your recruitment during, and also with the prevailing wage. So that is a pretty strict requirement.
With H-1B, I know this is mind-boggling. When companies, including foreign companies that supply workers to Americans, there is no requirement that they show that they have attempted to hire an American. None. So just put that in your permanent memory. There is no requirement with H-1B to find out if there are any Americans that want and can do that job. So that is over there, and that's a big deal. But today we're going to focus on PERM. With PERM, the employer is supposed to fill out a form proving that they have attempted to hire American workers. And at the same time, you just mentioned prevailing wage. Explain prevailing wage.
The prevailing wage is intended to make sure that Americans aren't being undercut based off of what you're going to pay that non-immigrant worker. That is also heavily gamed. You're relying on people who are not technical, not in the industry, who are taking on good faith that those skill requirements and education requirements are essentially needed. And they do align it with, the Department of Labor and the Bureau of Statistics on the codes to try to make that align with the correct prevailing wage. It's not only inaccurate as far as it's not, updated the way it should, but it doesn't take into consideration of other factors like, skill set, experience that are aligned with certain SOC codes versus what employers would tend to do is they'll use other SOC lanes, essentially, that are, one might be an engineering degree, the other one might be an analyst, and they like to use the less expensive SOC code in order to still undercut the employee. And so when that gets approved,
the whole point is that by requiring the industries or the companies to hire this foreign labor as a foreign worker at the prevailing wage, what would be the normal, prevailing wage in, say, Boise, Idaho, and what would it be in New York City, and what would it be in California, and what would it be in Houston? There are different prevailing wages. We know that in Mississippi, you don't make as much as you do in New York City. So there is a structure here, and the Department of Labor creates this structure. But there's something really weird about it, just right from the onset.
Right.
They have 4 levels, right?
Right.
There's 4 levels. The 2 bottom levels, who comes up with this stuff?
Median wage. Yeah.
They're not even medium wage. And guess what? They usually determine to be almost exclusively the prevailing wage to prove that we're not undercutting American labor, workers, and wages. They choose the ones that are at the bottom 1 or 2.
Typically. And that's what you see. You see on average about over 60% on most employers. If not, depending on the employer, you'll see almost 90% will be at that level 2. They avoid level 1 because of the scrutiny that they'll end up getting if they use it too much. So they like to stick in that 2 to 3 range. But what you'll see is that 4 is even the closest one that you'll find that's actually more accurate. But what people don't know about the law and what it says is the prevailing wage or people similarly situated. Because I will tell you that you can go to San Jose, you are not going to make the same as an engineer at one of the FANG group versus one of the, just a regular tech company. You're just not going to make the same. And that's why that key to that law is really important to really pay attention to people who are similarly situated. Because employers and the Department of Labor states this on their performance website, that they don't have access to what that employer is submitting to, the government of what they're paying their employees, right? So they have to make those statements.
Oh, okay.
And so that data is missing. And so most of the time what you will see, and I've proven this with a couple different employers, on Glassdoor, employees will post what they make, and then you can look and see what prevailing wages they've been submitting, and you will see a significant difference. And that's similarly situated with the same title. They're not even coming close to being the same.
So
but
there's
the DOL
fraud.
Doesn't.
There's fraud here. And because the system is sort of so broken up, no database speaks to another, there aren't requirements that employers allow access, that they throw the doors open to the wages that they have so that they can just lie. They can lie and say this is the prevailing wage. And so we have 12 employees that make $120,000 a year, but we'll put in this ad for $65,000 a year, and the Department of Labor, Department of Justice, no one else will know any better, and so they get away with it over and over and over again.
And they try to make the jobs seem more complicated than what they are, because once it gets to the UCIS level, it becomes more. They'll get more scrutiny
What's
from
UCIS?
the UCIS.
What's UCIS?
The DOL. They're the approvers for the H-1B, but they're also like the second step after you get approved from the DOL for permanent residency. So they're the
United States Citizenship and Immigration Service, right? USCIS. It's United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS. They are the ones. Go ahead.
Yeah, and as I say, but when you review those prevailing wages, there's a couple of interesting factors there. One, when you see people who are commonly using that 2 to 3 range, it's like or even 1 to 2 range. You see so many with master's degrees getting that 1 to 2 range. So you're saying somebody with entry level with 2 to 5 years of experience is entry. Like entry in our field would be somebody who's fresh out of college, their first year, bachelor's, and that's what they're offering a majority. And a majority of the abusers are the ones that are saying it's level 2 or 3, that you're going to see that trend. And so you're seeing a downgrade in our industry, because a master's used to mean that, you have not only more education, but when you see 2 to 5 years of experience on, that is somebody that is fitting into that more middle management level. but instead they're putting them in these level entry,
Entry level.
pay rate. Yeah. And what you'll also see is that, and we did this study at the Red Line Project, is that there's about, 2 million applications for prevailing wage, but only 20% are being used. And it makes makes you get a little confused because for Amazon, for example, these are prevailing wage in itself. You can actually see it says it's a perm in the data that the DOL publishes. So you know that it's for permanent residency. And what I've seen, like with an Amazon case, is that there was over 1,500 applications submitted for the same prevailing wage. These applications for perm are supposed to be unique, bona fide. They're supposed to be skills that no American has. But then you see Amazon, and you can publish this because this is their own data within the DOL. It's published for anybody to validate what I'm saying. But over 1,500 applications, you're saying there wasn't 1,500 Americans? There's 1,500 immigrant, non-immigrant visa holders that could do those jobs. Doesn't really line up. But not only that, but you're undercutting that prevailing wage because you're just paying 1,500 people the same exact wage, saying that they have the same exact skills, the same exact experience, and the same exact requirements. And again, it's supposed to be special. It's supposed to be something that Americans can't do. The numbers don't really add up to being special or unique. It just looks like a way to control the cost of employees is what it comes to.
As J.D. Vance said in that amazing speech that he gave, he said that innovation, instead of innovating, Americans have been improving profits. American industry has been improving profits by outsourcing to cheap labor or importing cheap labor immigrants into the United States. So the point being is that if that's the way that you're going to improve the value of the company and your annual reports, the bottom line, the profit margin, you are literally going to be doing it just by cutting costs, by putting inferior labor in the position, instead of by hiring at a higher wage Americans who are innovative, imaginative, and are going to break new ground with innovations. And so that's what he said. What you're telling me here, I think, Amanda, is this, that all these companies that are in this system of the immigration industrial complex are using this Department of Labor prevailing wage structure. They have a 4-tier structure, and the bottom 2 tiers are lower than the medium wage. They are using usually number 2 at the bottom or number 3. They try to balance it out so that there's no red flags, and they bring in people and they categorize them as entry level or experienced. They don't line up. The whole intention is to keep salaries low, but that doesn't stay within a closed system, right, Amanda? You have the entire United States where all other Americans are working in the same industry. So doesn't that suppress their wages? If we bring in 100,000 people that are going to make $70,000 a year, $65,000 a year, and what they should be making is $140,000 a year or more, that's going to keep that.
And that's what you start to see too, as well. You'll see those trends where you're not seeing the amount that people are making going to skyrocket, like they intended. If you look at any studies where it predicted like how many jobs were going to be needed and how much the salaries were going to be, 5-10 years ago, none of those are in, none of them. So that it controls not just what people are making, but the benefits as well. If you remember during when I was a kid, everybody talked about going to Google because that was where you were going to get massages, and that you had a Starbucks there, and that they had unlimited daycare and all these really cool benefits that would make it your dream job. Those have completely gone away.
Oh, really?
The rights to work from home have gone away, and everything has become this pip factory where if you don't work your life and soul into that job, you will end up being on the pip and you're going to get let go. So it becomes more of a control thing as much as it is taught. because you don't want people to ask for more things. You don't want them to ask questions. You don't want them to raise up concerns, because they know that if they get into the unemployment line, you're going to be joining about 1 million other Americans that are all in the same field who are desperate for jobs but can't get them, because not only are we laying them off, and is what we're bringing is here every year. We just went through the 2022, 2023, and 2024 massacres, and yet we ran 2 re-lotteries for more H-1 workers.
Okay, explain massacres. Nobody, I may know what the massacres are, you may, but most people don't necessarily know what the massacres are.
The tech mass layoffs. So you had, for example, Intel that laid off, I think it was 15,000. You had Amazon lay off 8,000 and then another 1,000 the next year. You had Amazon who laid off 10,000. You just had them getting hit after hit. But then when you're in these internal engineering group that people are anonymous, people are assigned to their employers, what you're also seeing is that PIP, the silent layoff, have been hitting people just as much as the ones that we hear about, the ones that they're required to report.
What is the PIP? Explain PIP.
Performance improvement plan, which is what they're using. And I do feel like this is heavily tied into their immigration programs, because they know that if they lay off a certain amount of employees, they are not allowed to do the recruitment or to hire H-1B or anyone for permanent residency after those layoffs. So if you do it silently, where it's not known or public, then you can, continue to ask for more of your H-1B and more, and continue trying to get permanent residency for your current stock of H-1B.
So how does performance improvement plans work? They're claiming that they're analyzing a department or or company-wide, a segment of the company, and they need to increase performance. And so they're basically saying that we have to lay off a mass of people or a number of people or selective people in order to increase or improve the performance of the company or the division within the company. And so they're just quietly laid off. Is that what you're calling?
It's less complicated than that. So there's a couple of things. One, you avoid the scrutiny of the layoff. But 2, you don't have to pay severance. You will often see that the people who are being affected by these PIPs have no history or prior history of having any performance issues. And what you'll see is that people that are targeted are often not the ones that have come here from another country. It's often the Americans that are being hit the hardest. It's often, and has been for a long time, been the employees that are older. Anybody older than 35, 40, 50, you're the first to be cut every single time. And you've had zero history of having any performance issues. So it's a tactic. It's a tactic to avoid the DOL scrutiny, and it's a tactic to not have to pay severance.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that the PIP is when they go through a bunch of staff and say, oh, I don't know if there's large numbers or not, but they say, oh, you're just not working up to snuff. You're not hitting our benchmarks, our standards. We just need to let you go. So they're firing. It's not a layoff. They are actually firing them. But because they're firing them, they're not entitled to any severance pay. And these are usually Americans with a lot of experience and a lot of a very high level, multifaceted skill set.
A lot of invested stocks that they lose.
Yeah. I just talked to I just spoke to somebody that I'm going to be interviewing next week, who lost a bunch of stock because of this kind of performance review or layoffs.
Very true. And I watched my previous employer, and I seen documents that specifically targeted making sure that they put people at the lower percentage. You can only put certain people at the top percentage, which makes them easier targets to put on those PIPs.
What do you mean by lower percentage?
Lower percentage of performance targets. So they mandated that a large percentage of employees stay within that lower range. For one, they don't get as big of a bonus. They don't get stocks. But they also, like I said, they become the easier target to, quote unquote, place on a PIP.
Wow, there's so much. I don't want to overload people. We are going to go and talk about perm and how Amanda. What I love about Amanda's passion is that she cares about the workers. Not only has she been in the field and experienced extreme, I would say, workplace hostility, discrimination, I would say mental abuse by the employers working within virtually all foreign workers in a department, and she being the one of the only two or three that were Americans and I guess happened to be white. And so she's gone through it, and her heart is breaking for America and for America's tech workers as mine. And so she wanted to start off this first show that we're doing here with perm, because this is where they are required to prove that they have offered the job to American workers, couldn't find it, and had to hire foreign workers that to become permanent resident workers and eventually green card holders. So let's just get started from the top of your article and I guess go down through it step by step.
Yeah. So the first thing that people need to know is that, and this is a misconception, and I don't think I have this in the article and I can add it, but a lot of people think that those perm jobs that, that are available, that you see in those newspapers, that somebody's already working in those. And just to squash that, that is absolutely false. In order to go through the permanent residency process, especially with a non-immigrant worker, that has to be a bona fide new job offer. That is not somebody else's job. And some of the other requirements that they have to have is that if you've laid off an American in the last 6 months, you have to notify those Americans who are in that, either that same position in the same area of where that employment is going to be. But you don't even have to have the same title. If you can do 50% of that job and that you can learn the rest in a reasonable amount of time, you have to be considered qualified, and they have to notify you that that job opportunity exists and give you an opportunity to not only apply, but they have to interview you.
What we're seeing here is that these perm jobs have to be brand new jobs, not somebody with, and by that you mean that company A is adding a new division or a new kind of a job, or is it just another job slot? So say they have product engineers and they're going to add a new product engineer, or is this a brand new kind of a job?
Well, the H-1B worker is in a temporary position. They're a non-immigrant temporary visa holder. They're not in a permanent role. And so in order to place them into a permanent role, you have to create one. So it is a brand new role.
Oh, wait a minute. Are you saying that they have to prove that there's no H-1B, in essence, somebody in the position that they're going to be translating into a perm applicant? I think I'm confused. It's a brand new job. No one's ever held it at that company. It's a brand new position.
It's why with the prevailing wage, when they're describing that job, which they often tailor to the non-immigrant worker, it should be the job's minimum requirements to do that job, not the requirements that match the H-1B worker. It should be, that specific for that new job.
Are they normally trying to take an H-1B temporary worker that's a non-immigrant worker and transfer him or translate him or make him into a perm? Is it normally that they're taking the H-1B who's in a position and they just want to make him perm?
The non-immigrant worker that the job is technically intended for, because they got to go through the permanent residency process, they have to apply to that job just as much as you do. And they have to go through the same process. And essentially when they're filing the 9089, they're saying that they hired that H-1B person to fulfill that job. And it doesn't have to be H-1B. It could be L-1, it could be F-1. But what they're saying is that here we are, we're going to file for the permanent residency. And this non-immigrant worker was the only qualified person to do this.
Okay. So those are the two qualifications are that they have to have, it's a new job, as opposed to what? A job that somebody's holding right now?
Yeah, because you wouldn't advertise, like they're already doing the job. You wouldn't advertise their position. So the way that the regulation is written, you have to create a bona fide new job. So it has to be completely open, and it's got to be open to any American to apply.
Okay, I get it now, because you're not just morphing the current position that somebody in the company has into a new job or an H-1B position. What they're saying is create a new job, and that means that Americans can apply, and it means the H-1B can apply, or L-1 or whatever, but it's a wholly new position. And what was the second requirement?
So you had the prevailing wage, you have to do the recruitment. The recruitment has its own list of requirements. But what I was talking about is with the laid off employees. So if you've done a layoff within the last 6 months, one of the things that you have to do when you create that opportunity is notify the laid off Americans that can fill that position, that opportunity exists, and that if they don't, apply to it, and they don't want it, then it's going to go to somebody potentially who is looking to have permanent residency.
So say they've laid off, 10,000, 5,000 people in the past year or 2 or 3 years. They've laid them off or fired them, not with cause, but I mean fired them permanently, or is it always a layoff? I'm not sure. But they've laid them off.
Either way.
It could be either way.
Yeah, and even if you were on a PIP, they can only disqualify you as not qualified is if they fired you for severe policy violations. So even if you got PIP, technically you should still be notified.
Okay. So here's a group of people that used to work for Microsoft, Google, Yahoo, across the board. And every time they do a perm, they have to reach into their database for everyone who has left their company, fired, laid off, etc. Do you know how far back they have to go?
Just 6 months.
Oh, wow. Okay, so 6 months, that doesn't seem like that's not a good time frame.
Well, if it was in good faith, you would think that they should really try and maybe go back a year, maybe 2 years, right? Because, especially when they've done as big as layoffs as 15,000 people.
All it is an automated email or something that you just send out through a mailing.
But what they like to do is, and you probably have seen these, where there was a leaked email from Google that they were going to do a perm pause. You've probably seen that Amazon was in perm pause, and they try to frame it and use the PR angle that, we know all these tech, companies are doing mass layoffs, and out of respect for Americans and how hard it is to get, through the recruitment process, through the DOL, that we're going to pause. But what I've seen, not only in documentation from the immigration lawyers who specifically use the perm pause to still continue to recruit, but to avoid scrutiny from the Department of Labor, they don't file until after that 6 months, so that they can say that there was no layoff, even though they did the recruitment during the layoff, which is still in violation. And I've seen enough of the data to prove many of them do that, because you'll see the trend where you might see 2 applications that got submitted during that 6 months window, but what you'll see is that a bunch will come in immediately after, a lot, in some cases hundreds. And what you'll see is that period, which is listed on this, there's a whole section that says SWA job order, which is the state job board date. Those dates are during that 6 month window. So they still recruited. They avoided scrutiny and having to trigger an audit. Because when you select that and this is in the article as well, when you select that there had been a layoff in the last 6 months, it increases your audit chances by 50%. And they know that because they've subpoenaed for that information, the DOL. So they want to no layoff has happened in the last 6 months. And the reason why they don't want to be audited is because they're going to have to prove that they notified those Americans of that job opportunity. And they're going to have to prove that after they notified them, and that none of them either said, yes, they want to interview, which who wouldn't if you just got laid off, but the American wasn't qualified or more qualified than the non-immigrant worker.
So the Department of Labor, the USCIS, Department of State, everybody is relying on the good intentions and honesty of the industry, of the individual companies, and it is essentially an honor system. So the only way to catch these violations and corruption is if you can find something that's visible on the surface, that got past their army of lawyers and strategists, and then you file a suit, or the Department of Labor sees something and they go after it. And at that point, then eventually you could maybe find some information out and expose it. But because unless you file a lawsuit, or the Department of Labor, Justice, whatever, files a lawsuit, none of this information comes to light. It's just the honor system. Well, of course, eBay says it, so we believe it. Of course, there haven't been any layoffs, or they waited, or they sent these emails. There is no way to verify this without hiring lawyers and dedicating resources in government agencies to actually do an investigation, at which you and I know, just common sense tells us that most people don't want to trigger that every time somebody puts in for a perm application process.
Right. Well, and there's a couple of reasons, why this happens. For one, they don't have the capacity to do the amount of audits that they should be doing.
Right.
Number two, based off of the pattern and practices that I've seen, even if you review the one, it looks like on the surface that they did the right thing for that one. But what you'll see is like in Amazon's case, where they filed applications for over 500 different, non-immigrant workers for permanent residency. They only did one recruitment effort. So if only one of those applications got audited, it appears that they did all the recruitment they were supposed to do. But instead, they did it only once, and they filed over 500 applications. What you'll see is that, and that's called batching, by the way, which is horrible, and I can't wait for that to burn a lot of these employers. The whole intent behind batching is that whether you're a day oneer and you started the company day one, if they're already in the process of recruitment and doing the firm process, they got their prevailing wage, they're in the recruitment process, and you match that criteria, which is often, it's tailored or vague or, however they want to, list it, they'll just scoot you right in. And so you're already on your residency and you've only been on, U.S. soil for maybe a week.
Okay.
And that is the intent behind batching. It also is because recruitment is so hard. They will regularly be recruiting for the same positions, same titles. And if one fails? All right, well, I have one already going on the second. And that one didn't get any American fly. So now we're going to file all 600 of these people for this one. And Amazon's not alone. Google does it. Pretty much anybody who is a Fregaman client, Appleman client, many of them love that machine. Erickson Immigration Group. Those are some of the major immigration attorneys.
Those are the attorneys. So go through those names again so people can do their own research.
Fregaman, who made over $900 million in profits in 2023. They're one of the largest ones, so they're the ones that have some of the major big clients. Then you have Appleman, who has the other big bulk of those clients. And then you have Erickson Immigration Group, who has those more medium-sized big tech companies like eBay and Salesforce and DoorDash and several others. And that's actually how I began this process. Is I started profiling the immigration practices of those immigration lawyers. I have Erickson Immigration Group's whole immigration policies and how they do things. And none of it actually aligns with the regulations. It's all it's trying to circumvent the laws, where I've spent a lot of my time really reviewing the DOL regulations. It's also kind of tailors into my background from the military and the Department of Defense. I owned our regulations and making sure we were always meeting standards and the languages. And when I started going through that, I started realizing none of them are actually doing the right thing. None of them. Like, these applications do not meet the letter of the law. They're all circumventing the law, and they're taking advantage of the fact that even if they get one audit, they'll just redact it and resubmit later. There's no, harm to them. And then on top of that, the language in the law actually allows the immigration attorneys to do whatever they want because the employer is ultimately going to be held responsible. Sure, that might ruin their relationship later down the road, but the immigration attorney doesn't bear any for circumventing the law. And they're very good at selling out Americans for profits.
Yes, the companies are doing it. The immigration lawyers are doing it. And the one of the things that fries me more than any other is these foreign these massive multi-billion-dollar employment agencies, if you will. They're just body shops. They're bringing in thousands upon thousands of Indians. I don't know what China does. I don't think they're anywhere close in the structure of how Chinese and versus Indians come to America to be educated, employed, or naturalized. I think they're miles apart.
As we'll be diving in later, we'll show that is intentional. As we get into some of the work that I've uncovered, we will show the contracts and agreements and how that has, become such a, why is it being so heavily abused by one country? It's all intentional, and it was all planned out, and it is not the letter of the law, and it is certainly not for the benefit of America or American workers in any way.
This is such an obscure thing. It's so complex, and that is intentionally so. There are so many loopholes, and the things that are not loopholed, that are just violations, it's impossible to know unless you mount a huge legal action, which that, of course, is a barrier to entry. So the average American, I call this show America First Immigration, and I'm really committed to fleshing out what that is. And one of the standards on America First Immigration will be this, that it's all got to be utterly transparent, online, and easy to see, not some small print database where you see just all these companies, you don't know where they are, you don't know how to find them, you don't understand the information. The user interface is deliberately designed or stupidly designed so that if an American goes to that page on the federal government's websites, they're just going to give up. I've been to many of those pages. The only way that we can have immigration moving forward that is America first is that you go to the website and it's like X or, just any other user interface where you can go find out every company, immigration lawyer, everything that they're doing, and it's all just pops up in a user interface that's, make it for kids. Pretend I'm a 5-year-old. And that's the way, but we want to end this altogether. So just go through what workers, hopefully tech workers, are watching this. And if they want to have an ABC checklist of how they go through and challenge this and fight this system and actually also expose these bad actors in our tech industry, just walk through that step by step.
Yeah. So, firstly, even though H-1B, that process doesn't require them to recruit, there is still a protection period for Americans, and they should know that. So if you've been laid off, 6 weeks before or after, you should really be paying attention to the DOL's website to make sure that they don't start requesting an H-1B worker when you were just laid off 6 months prior or 6 months after they've posted. And it doesn't have to be from them directly. There is another column within that DOL form it's the LCA document on the DOL's website. And not only that, but I will show them how to actually find the perm jobs, which is where I was getting with as well. So you want to be on the lookout. And whether or not you got laid off or you underemployed or unemployed right now, what we want you to go to these state job boards and find the exact perm. They like to hide them into newspapers. They often don't post them on their career page. Like Google never post perm jobs on their website, which is something Apple and Meta paid some hefty fines for not in good faith recruiting. They didn't use their own normal recruit efforts to try to find Americans, which is not in good faith. And so Google also doesn't post on our website. So the best bet for Americans, if you don't want to buy a Sunday paper, is to go to the state job boards. Every state has them. There's a national board as well. And there is a setting that I've discovered that you can use to find the perm jobs. And we'll have that listed in the article. And what I want Americans to know is when you're looking for these jobs, look for your titles or titles that you easily can adopt. Like for some people, you can be a program manager, a product manager, or a project manager. And usually the requirements are usually the same. Go for all of them. And what I want Americans to really know and understand is that you just have to be minimally qualified. If you see job requirements aren't standard to that job or don't make sense, they cannot say that you're qualified. They can't say you're not qualified if you can learn that job or that skill in a reasonable amount of time. So, for example, let's say it requires you to know Jira, but you know a competitor product Jira. They still have to consider you as qualified as an American. And none of this, you say you want to hire people who are less qualified than the non-immigrant worker? Yes, because I'm an American. They can't have permanent residency if I am qualified to do that job, for one. But
you're making a good point. I am seeing on X, because I don't go to Facebook, so somebody else can monitor that. But on X, what I am seeing is Indians both in America and I presume outside of America saying, I thought America, this is kind of a snide remark. They're very insulting to America and to Americans to consider this a problem, demeaning to us. And it's offensive, but hey, we're going to work within that construct. They're saying, well, I thought y'all were about merit-based. And now you want to take the lowest candidate, least qualified candidate, or a lower qualified candidate. And you just said one term, I'm an American, or they are Americans. Let's talk about that for a minute. What is immigration supposed to be about? Is it supposed to help America's interests? And is it better to hire somebody, a foreigner, than an American in any way? Is there any way that that's better
The law says no. The law says no. The law specifically says that they cannot harm an American, not harm their wages or their working conditions. They cannot enter our soil to displace us. That is what the law simply says. And it is
which law is that? Because I'm telling you,
Immigration Nationality Act, the INA.
Okay. The INA. Because it's almost all of it is we're not bringing in the 1/10 of 1%. We're not bringing the cream of the crop, the best of the best, the best and the brightest.
And we're going to show that. We're going to show that it's not a way.
So the very thing that I'm saying is America First Immigration, they're already saying, oh, we got that. That language is already there. It cannot harm Americans in any way. What are the...
Right. Not intended. You're not meant to be here on American soil if you displaced an American. The whole intent of the non-immigrant visa is that you are here because there is no qualified American that exists. And that is actually a reason it listed to be deported, is if you displaced an American. They should look up the language. You are easily deportable. Doesn't matter merit. If I'm qualified to do that job, I'm the American. I'm entitled to that position. And what's unique is Trump just, released that trade barriers document that he held up on Liberation Day.
Mm-hmm.
The language that India uses in their country, they have specific areas in employment or in owning certain operations that you are not allowed to work in those positions, own those type of companies unless you are only Indian. And in some cases, like in their law firm cases, you can't be a foreign law firm. They had that for a while unless you were Indian. And now it's like, okay, you can be a foreign law firm, but you can only represent non-Indian. But yet they want to tell us as Americans, we're not allowed to say it has to be American.
This is something where we're going to be talking about it, and we're going to be talking about it not with qualifications like, well, I'm not being racist, or I'm not being mean, or I'm not the... No. India and many other countries, I believe, have severe restrictions on opening up a business or even purchasing land or properties in their countries and restrict it to only the nationality. I don't think an ethnicity, but the nationality. You can only own a bank if you are Indian. But in America, we have all kinds of open doors to...
You can come here on a B1, B2 visa and open up an LLC.
All right.
Here in the United States. Yeah, we are wide open. These jobs, it is okay to say that it's for Americans. If there's a qualified American, it doesn't matter if that foreign worker has more experience, has more skills. That's not their job. The job is what has been created and who is minimally qualified, and they have to prioritize the American by law, or they cannot proceed with that permanent residency application, the law, or it's discrimination.
Well, so they've all violated the law, including everybody that is approving these things, because I don't know of one, and I would like every one of the tech bros and the tech giants to say, okay, I'm going to give you a spreadsheet, Elizabeth, WorldNetDaily, Amanda, of every single person that we've hired that no other person in America that was available could do that job. I guarantee you this, the list would be this long. It's a genius, right? And there are literally geniuses in Africa, Europe, Asia, Southeast Asia. So yeah, okay, bring over that guy that you're going to pay $1.5 million. But they're bringing over $60,000 a year workers, $70,000 a year workers. So there's no genius making $60,000 that I know of.
But then let's take it to my number 2. This is really important. So they want to make that argument. Oh, so you want somebody who's less qualified to do that job. Well, what my research has proven and shows is that 84%, if not more, of the time, they flex those standards for the foreign, meaning they require the American to have more experience, more skills, more requirements than what they actually hired that non-immigrant worker for. Meaning, if they required a master's, that's what an American seen. Often they hired a foreign worker with a bachelor's, which usually is, if it's in India, it's not even the equivalent of an American associate's.
What we're saying here is this, that you can see with all of these exceptions, all of these loopholes that they're creating loopholes, which were not intended to be there, and all of this corruption and criminality, that the only goal is to increase the bottom line, put you further in the black, not by innovation, not coming up with new products, new ways to do things, improvements on your current your current systems and products that you offer the public. It is to just increase the bottom line by decreasing expenses, and which would be primarily labor. So if I owned a company and it was making, let's just, not the tech sector type of company, I say we were making $20 million a year. And I said, you know what? I really need to prove that we're doing well, so we need to make $22 million a year or $24 million a year. But I've run out of good ideas. I don't have people that have good ideas, or I'm not listening to them, whatever. We're not going to innovate and make something better. We're going to say, let's just cut payroll. Let's offboard a bunch of expensive, experienced, high-waged Americans who may be getting vested with their stocks, and let's go to India or to some outsourcing company, body shop, and bring in a bunch of $40, $50, $60, $70, $80,000 workers that are going to be under our thumb. And now I've just cut off, say, $2 million from my payroll. And now, and by the way, all the benefits, so now I just increased the bottom line. I'm now a more successful company. But what have I done to America, to Americans, and to our future, and to our industrial base, our technological industrial base? We are eviscerating it and destroying it. And that's what you're saying. And they throw that, well, you're not merit-based anymore then. America's really not about merit. What we're saying is we don't want, firstly, if I'm an American, I can learn that job because I'm smart and I'm educated. And I've talked to tech person after tech person. I mean, I spent 2 hours with one person yesterday. I said, look, tell me this. Tell me about learning new languages. Right? So you've got JavaScript, you've got this. I mean, there's I don't know how many, there are unlimited. Listen to this, guys. He said to me, Elizabeth, if you know French and you know Italian and maybe Romanian, how easy do you think it's going to be to learn Spanish fluently? So, and of course, it's going to be easy. They're all interrelated languages, right? So he was talking about the fact that you can learn Cobalt and JavaScript, and I don't know if I'm making a fool of myself trying to list things I don't know, but to add another language so you would be qualified is nothing. What, you spend a weekend or 2 weeks and you hit the books? What do you do, Amanda, to learn a new language?
Me personally, because my background came in from master's, I had to learn tech on the fly. A lot of our engineers left because we got purchased and they didn't get big, raises. They're like, Amanda, you're smart. We need you to learn Python and JavaScript and start taking over the database engineering. All right, let's do this. And honestly, it was really, they gave me some hands-on training. Then there's some free websites out there. And then I did a couple certifications later down the road. But learning on the fly was honestly, and learning hands-on and just being involved in it was the best way to learn for me, because I am a hands-on learner. But when you come and you own, especially, tech that comes up with bugs or, outages, which I became very good at managing, there's no book on how to solve some of those. You can try to Google and you find an answer, but really you got to be able to think creative. I think some of those are the best engineers you'll find. But what I've seen in my research and found is that in India, they're not even doing 4-year degrees. They're using these diploma mill type processes, maybe spending 100 hours learning code. They're just learning the bare minimum, and then they're using AI to do the rest.
And cutting and pasting.
Right. So in this day and age, really anybody could be doing coding. You just aren't going to be that good at dealing with those things that come up that are, new, and that you have to be able to think creative and on your feet and solve those problems. You're not going to be good at that. And that's what you see as well. You just see so many bugs when it comes to working with offshore or people who are here on non-immigrant, visas. It was some of the worst engineering I've ever seen. And it about killed me for 2 years trying to keep up with managing the whole company and doing 70% of the development, because the multiple teams that I was provided just did not have the same skill set as the engineers that I had later down the road, of course, that left the company, that got laid off because we started offshore. If I would not have stayed, the company would have gone under. And in fact, when I did finally leave almost 2 years later, they lost all their top clients because they couldn't keep it from having outages. And I was the person that dealt with outages. They couldn't fix them. And so they ended up paying the SLAs over and over. And before long, the customer's like, we have to have something that's stable as part of the
What's an SLA?
A service level agreement. And in tech, that's very common. They, a lot of times big clients expect you to have uptime, meaning you're never down during work hours, over 99% of the time, or anywhere from 98% of the time. And depending on what your scale of outage is, it can be like P1, P2, different levels. That can save you in those percentages. But when you're out for, an hour, 2 hours, or a whole day, you've already maxed out your SLA. And you're going to have to pay whatever that SLA agreement is for not meeting that, requirement.
So you were at a company, you were not a coder. They got sold, bought out. All of the top level engineers, all the programmers, developers, they walked because, the company burned them. And so they said, Amanda, you're smart, learn to code. So you learned to code. You just learned
with
to
an
code.
intern. Yep.
I don't think a lot of Americans know this, Amanda. Why would my mother or even my husband know this? That when they're talking about, we have to have an army of engineers, software developers, programmers, because, India is training masses of numbers of software engineers and developers, and we can't keep up with it because we're doing this big, huge stuff here in America, and we need qualified talent, but we also need numbers of qualified talent. The reality is that you could go to any intelligent engineer, software developer, and say to them, learn this new language, learn this new system, learn this new platform. If they were not involved with healthcare records as an industry, as a focused industry, then learn all the stuff that you have to learn about the healthcare industry, because that's what we're going to be doing here. Or some other, this is, a different kind of an industry. So these are learnable skills, learnable knowledge that any American who's an intelligent American, and everybody I talk to in America about this issue is just a smart person. I think that's the standard in America in this industry. They can just learn it. And even somebody who's never done it before can learn it. You may not know the same as somebody who's been in 20 years in software development. I don't know. Maybe you can do the same thing that they do.
No, it took me many years. I stayed at that company for over 9 years. It was towards my 7th year that they decided to go do offshore. And after building up that team for 7 years, these are people that I, worked with every day. They let them go and said, hey, here's your equivalent engineers from overseas. And they were nowhere near the equivalent. And I managed that for 2 more years, but I about killed myself trying to do it, trying to meet the needs of the customer and run the company.
Because because the employees that this company hired overseas through, was it with one of those offshoring companies that they do all the hiring?
Offshore. Yeah.
All offshore.
And they were just horrible. Yeah. And not only that, but they game the system so much. So even if it's something simple that they should be able to manage, they'll carry it for 3 months. And I'm like, what are you doing? That should take you 3 hours. And they just get away with it and they bill it because they only make money as long as the work there. When you were talking about, how, we could take Americans that are smart and skill them, there's companies that do that. Like there's a company that I've been working with that's called Skillstorm. And they're kind of like a consultancy, a contracting firm. But what they do is they'll take veterans and they'll take first-generation American college graduates and upskill their skills, whether it's in cybersecurity or AI, or machine learning. They train them on that, whatever the contract needs. And so now they get to earn that skill and then they get to apply it. So now they have that experience and they only, get to do that job as long as the contract exists. But there's so many companies here that have that offshoring model where they like they're here in the US, but then part of their clients are either, the employees are overseas or they're H-1B. And so they're able to control the cost to be a lot lower than what he would have to pay the American workers. He can't stay competitive when it's like that. And he's lost a lot of that opportunity in that space. And not only that, but now they're starting to overwhelm the government side of contracts, which didn't used to be a thing, but it's becoming more prominent. So they pushed out the American companies that could skill Americans like Skillstorm has or other, competitors of Skillstorm that primarily just hire Americans. So this whole attitude, it's special skills that nobody else can have. First of all, show me the stats, because what I've seen, that's not true at all. Like based off of what I've seen, you're asking for people who have no experience, no skills, they can do any occupation, and you're trying to say that they need to be here permanently. I guarantee you could take a kid out of college and they have the same level of skill requirements and education and experience. So you're asking that non-immigrant worker, and you're saying that you couldn't find an American to do that? Absolutely false. And it's fraud. It's just flat out fraud.
And that's what we're going to be proving over and over and over
I
again.
can prove that with their own data, without all the other research that I've done. Their own data, what that employer has submitted to the Department of Labor, our government. I can prove without a fathom of a doubt that there is no way that Americans can't do majority of these jobs. There's very few and far between that I actually see anything that's a unit, to be honest. And if we're importing these skills, why does over 50% of them have education from the U.S.? We're not importing skills. We're training them with the skills and we're giving them the experience and the technology and they're taking it back home. That's what we're doing. And it's hurting Americans and it's hurting America and our position globally. And nobody really sees it as that because, yes, we all are all worried about our positions and our jobs, but it's more than that. And it's intentional. And that's what we're going to be showing to Americans is that this is beyond just our jobs. This is a economical espionage from deep in its core. and it's going to hurt America until we stop. So Americans, whether they care about the skill shortage and they really believe that, or if they, it doesn't bother them because it's not going to affect their job, it hurts us all. It's hurting our economy. It's going to continue to erode our middle class, and it's going to continue to hurt us for lifetimes. And if we don't want our children to have to grow up and live that into a third world country, we're going to have to start fixing things and fixing them fast and making sure that our government works for us and stops trying to facilitate what the tech bros want. Because right now, that's what you see from the DOL, is they're helping them and not helping the Americans that pay their bills.
You know, we are actually creating our new China. Way back when, in the 70s, when Nixon and Kissinger started, making friends with communist China, they were dirt poor country, third world, and now today they're an economic powerhouse. I know we have to defeat them, but I'm not worried about defeating them anymore, the more I learn. But nevertheless, they are a military powerhouse. They're building high-tech, hypersonic missiles, and they have drones that are extraordinary. And this deep seek, is that what it was called? They are doing some really important stuff. Let's be clear. Without America capitulating to their best interests, instead of American best interests and common sense, China would not be the greatest global threat today. America and American industries, through billions and billions and billions of dollars of foreign investment in infrastructure and building businesses in China to be filled with slave labor and prison labor, China would not be a global economic superpower that is attempting to take over our position there. But guess what? We're so focused on taking down China. And at the same time, I will hear India not on the list over and over again when we're talking about our greatest threats.
And
India
is the newest incoming biggest economy that's growing the fastest. It's
and they're
India.
doing it through espionage and manipulation of our laws. And it is a grand scheme. It is not a one-off. Governments don't just do one-offs. They have plans. And India has a plan. And so
it's been put in place the last 2 centuries. Yeah.
Two decades?
Yeah, 2 decades. Sorry. Yes, it's been in place the last 2 decades. Yes. They had an initiative. They wanted to regain what they believed was their throne that was, taken away from them from Britain. And they want to...
You mean by Britain?
By Britain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when they were colonized. And now that what they really want is to become the global technical leaders of the world, number one. And they'll do that any means possible. And they've done a very good job. Like Trump was saying, he doesn't, he doesn't blame other countries for trying to make their countries first. And I get that 100%. But the way that it's been done, the schemes that have been put into place, and the amount of, just straight up, the intellectual property theft, and the way that they've done it, they're trying to steal it. And that, to me, does not get respect. I
don't care if they are respect or not. I don't want them to be the number one global economic or technological superpower. And if we
don't want us to pay for it, or to be the one that...
Exactly. Because we paid for China. We basically made China what it is today. And now we're going to have to undo it. But as we're undoing China, hopefully, we are building up India and the huge push. And we can't, we can't even go there today. You wanted, actually, to go through your article and go through the checklist of what to do. But maybe what we should do, because we haven't even come close to that, is what do you want to do? Should we just put a link in to that story and post it? It'll be on the front page of WorldNetDaily. We'll post it to X. And the intention of the story is how American workers can identify the corruption in the process where they are violating American law, and then they can move to document and move to take action to expose it or perhaps take it down. I'm not sure. The action is to either get the job or to expose it or to what is the intention?
And I'm gonna add more to the article. I'm gonna add some of the stats that we were talking about so people can see that. I'm gonna add the links to where to go to find not just the performance records, but as well where to find these jobs, and the intent, and also the link to know your rights. Like, where do you go to actually understand what the regulation says so you can know your rights? The ultimate goal is, for one, a lot of these employers and these immigration law firms have gotten away with this because Americans just don't know. Most Americans don't even know what a perm is. They think it's a bad hairdo. They really should know their rights. We're not
Actually, I got one perm in my life when I was probably 21. I still have a picture of it, and it looked like it was a poodle, and it was the most humiliating experience. So perm is bad in many ways.
Yeah. But, that's the thing, is that Americans aren't familiar with immigration because we're not immigrant. We are here. We are, the grassroots of America. And so I want Americans to know their rights. I want them to understand the data and to really see that it is all a lot. The skill is a lot. The jobs are a lot. And once you start seeing that, and I start exposing through this platform all the other lies that came with it, that has enabled these corporations and this other country to not only, cipher out our opportunities, our jobs, our American dream, but they're, setting it up to where that is going to become something that they can continue to own. They have too many people, so they want to embed more people here and throughout the world. And so we're going to continue to have to fight this. And the only way to combat it today is using the laws that are available to us today. Because right now, I don't see any, immediate future of rewriting of the laws. I see some action happening in the near future, which I'm excited about, but I don't see the laws being rewritten in America's favor anytime soon. And so it's time for us to know what our rights are, so that way, when those rights are violated, we are, pushing, where we're supposed to push. So we're going to the DOJ, we're going to the DOL, we're going to the OIG, but also just the PR aspect of it, and letting Americans know that if you see this data and it's theirs, I didn't manipulate it. They filed these documents. I am just putting it into full perspective so Americans can see the full numbers of what they've done. And when they see that, when you see that, over 80% of the time they flex their standards for non-immigrant workers, but they
flexing the standards, what that means, very simply, I love the word, but flexing the standards means this, that when they go and put in a job description for an American worker, they require, a master's degree or 4 years experience with this and knowledge of these 13 different languages and platforms and blah, blah, blah. They've got this. And then for the same position, and Amanda tracks this, she actually can see this because her brain is like a computer. And what she does is then she can find the replacement job, because nobody can fill this job. Nobody can fill it. They add things like you said, that the ridiculousness of some of these job descriptions, the requirements of the skill set requirements, their abilities and history. Okay, they need to learn underwater basket weaving while they are programming in COBOL. That's a joke, but that's what they're doing to make it really simple. Because if it's just a bunch of computer words, we're not going to get it. If you can be a high wire actor, or if you can be a high wire gymnast, or whatever you call those people, and you can also program in these 14 different languages, and you've had a baby in the last 3 years, and your dog's name is Spot, you can have the job.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, that's an exaggeration, but that's
turn around and they file the perm, and it turns out that person didn't even have those same requirements.
They just needed 1 year of experience. They only know JavaScript, and
completely different job. Yeah, all of that. But on top of that, these are supposed to be special skills, special jobs that no American can do. But Amazon's a great example, or 1,500 applications for non-immigrant workers with one prevailing wage, one job.
So there's
Can't be
so the fact that there's one prevailing wage means that it's not this standout job.